Chapter 641 Accusations against Caspian. After hearing what Macy said, Caspian swiftly let go. It was in the heat of the moment. I had no choice. "Are you all right?" Caspian asked somewhat awkwardly. "I'm fine. You just bumped into my chest a bit," Macy replied. "I'm glad. Stop trying to defend me from bullets next time," Caspian instructed. "You're Lord Caspian. No harm must come to you. It's my duty to shield you from bullets," Macy declared. Caspian had mixed feelings. Macy had thrown herself in front of him to shield him from bullets many times now. Was it truly just because she felt it was her responsibility to protect him? Did it not involve any personal feelings whatsoever? "It's not safe, Lord Caspian." "Hurry up and leave," Macy urged. "I'll check on His Majesty." "You guys stay here and stay safe," Caspian said. "Understood," Macy answered with a nod. Caspian entered the hotel, flanked by the armored soldiers. The hotel guests were overwrought as they gathered in the lobby with fear etched on their faces. Caspian got into the elevator and headed straight to the top floor. Once he got out, he saw Balthazar, who was surrounded by his guards. Some of the senior officials looked anxious and panicked as well. When the crowd spotted Caspian, they immediately cleared a path for him. "Are you all right, Your Majesty?" "You must have been startled." "I deserve to be punished for what happened," Caspian said to Balthazar. "It's nothing, Caspian. I've been through similar situations countless times now. You don't need to feel responsible," Balthazar calmly replied. Jerry stepped forward, and with a hostile expression, he declared, "Your Majesty, we kept your visit to South Lake City a secret, and it had been you who chose Jade Dragon Grand Hotel. In that case, how did the enemy's secret agents find out where you're staying?" "The enemy spies have been hiding in South Lake City all along. It's not a surprise that they found out about it somehow," Caspian said. "You're in charge of South Lake City, and you even stationed so many people near the hotel. Yet none of your subordinates realized that the enemy's secret agents would attack from the opposite building. Are they doing their jobs?" Jerry questioned. "I have no explanation for that yet, but I will get to the bottom of this as soon as possible," Caspian said. "That's enough. The danger hasn't been eliminated yet, so don't waste time on such unimportant matters," Balthazar interrupted. He knew Jerry wanted to use this incident to target Caspian. Since Balthazar had spoken, Jerry stopped talking. "Your Majesty, please remain in the hotel for the time being. I will return once I eliminate all the spies," Caspian declared. "You're the head of the five-war god Caspian. You need not handle such simple matters yourself. Let the generals take care of it," Balthazar instructed. Aware of the dangers lurking all around, Balthazar didn't want to put Caspian at risk. "Please don't worry about me, Your Majesty. I have survived numerous wars. These spies don't scare me," Caspian staunchly declared. "May I leave, Your Majesty?" "All right then. I look forward to hearing the good news from you." Balthazar relented. Caspian nodded and left. When he got down to the lobby, Macy approached him and asked puzzledly, "Are you leaving, Lord Caspian?" "I can't stand by and do nothing when His Majesty was attacked in the hotel. Jerry is already suspicious of me. He thinks I let the spies in. I have to get rid of all the enemy spies," Caspian growled through gritted teeth. "What a loathsome man. Your loyalty to His Majesty is clear for all to see, Lord Caspian. Why would you want to assassinate His Majesty?" "That's ridiculous," Macy cried out angrily. "Jerry's a treacherous man. It's not his first time trying to cause trouble for me. He has no evidence against you, Lord Caspian. Surely he can't just level random accusations at you," Macy said. "He's a petty, vicious man who won't mind stooping to false accusations. I'm guessing he'll use my position as His Majesty's successor as my motive," Caspian theorized. "We can't keep him around then," Macy exclaimed. "He has His Majesty's favor right now, so it won't be easy for us to get rid of him. We have to have concrete evidence to use against him first. Otherwise, His Majesty would grow suspicious if we acted rashly," Caspian said. "But he dared to make false accusations against you, Lord Caspian. If we don't get rid of him, I'm sure he'll continue to target you." Macy was concerned. "It's a fact that there was an assassination attempt on His Majesty in my territory. I can't absolve myself of responsibility. Didn't I instruct you guys to eliminate all potential dangers? Why were there enemy spies hiding nearby?" Caspian questioned. "We kept a close watch on everyone in the surrounding area and didn't find anything suspicious. The enemy secret agents were already on standby before His Majesty got to the hotel," Macy reported. "His Majesty only decided to stay at the hotel after he landed at the airport." "How did the news get leaked so quickly?" Caspian was puzzled. "It seems possible that there's a mole beside His Majesty. That could be how the news got out. Otherwise, how would the enemy know which room His Majesty was staying in? Macy suggested. Caspian nodded. Macy had a point. Many high-ranking government officials had followed Balthazar to South Lake City. It was possible that there was a mole or two among them. There was no other way to explain how Balthazar's location was leaked so swiftly. The enemy spies were able to set themselves up for the assassination attempt in the time it took Balthazar to get from the airport to the hotel. That alone proved that there was a mole within Balthazar's entourage. Who could it be? Caspian pondered. I don't know. I'm only in charge of the Phoenix Vanguard. Why don't you get? Alright, we'll drop this for the time being. Our most important task right now is to eliminate all the enemy spies and ensure His Majesty's safety, Caspian said. Got it! Macy nodded. All of a sudden, a heavy-duty truck came barreling toward them. Stop! You're not allowed to approach, the guards yelled. However, the truck didn't stop. It's the spies! Attack! Macy shouted. Macy and her subordinates swiftly started firing at the truck, but the bullets did no damage. The truck had clearly been modified. It was charging straight at the hotel. Be careful, Lord Caspian. Something strange. There could be a bomb in the truck, one of the Phoenix Vanguard shouted. Caspian was alarmed. If the truck crashed into the hotel, the entire building might collapse. Balthazar was still inside the hotel. If an explosion occurred, he would be in great danger. As the truck continued to rush toward the hotel, Caspian and Macy remained in their spot, showing no intention to leave. Everyone else was stupefied. Chapter 642 Bomb Attack. Members of Task Force Rose who were stationed inside the hotel panicked when they spotted the truck. If Caspian didn't get out of the way, he would be smashed to smithereens. And once the truck crashed into the hotel, the entire building would cave in. Run, Lord Caspian! Macy screamed. We can't let the truck crash into the hotel, Caspian resolutely declared. But we can't stop it, Macy cried out anxiously. Get to safety! I'll deal with this! Caspian shoved Macy out of the way. He raised his diatanium dagger and slashed at the truck. In an instant, everyone could almost see a circular shockwave slamming against the vehicle. They all jumped in shock. No one expected Caspian to be this formidable. He wielded his dagger with such force and dominance. At the very next second, the front of the truck split into two. Everyone froze in fear. Who would have thought that Caspian possessed such invincible might? Although Macy and the Phoenix Vanguard had witnessed the fight between Caspian and Robert, they had never seen anything like this. Truth be told, even Caspian was taken aback. Since he began studying the Eldorian scroll fragment, he grew even stronger. But despite breaking into two, the truck continued to speed toward the hotel. After a few seconds, the truck started veering to the side. The spy driving the truck exclaimed in shock as the vehicle shot past Caspian and crashed against the wall. Several bombs fell out of it. And everyone trembled in fear. Covered in blood, the enemy spy crawled out of the truck. Mary swiftly shot him to death. Lord Caspian! Are you okay, Lord Caspian? The Phoenix Vanguard ran over to check on Caspian. I'm fine. Deal with the bombs right away, Caspian commanded. Yet, sir. The soldiers swiftly did as told. Macy, I want you and your team to eliminate the enemy spies. Check all the surrounding buildings. We can't have any more accidents, Caspian said. I'm on it. Macy and the Phoenix Vanguard rushed off. Soon, they located all of the enemy's secret agents hidden near the hotel. A strict lockdown was enforced within a 1-mile radius of the hotel. Everyone needed permission to travel in and out of the area. Balthazar was informed of the situation, and he heard about Caspian splitting the front of the truck in half. Caspian is indeed an unparalleled warrior. He single-handedly overcame such a dangerous crisis, Balthazar remarked. That's right, Your Majesty. Lord Caspian is as mighty as 1,000 men combined, one of the high-ranking officials said. If he hadn't taken action, I'm afraid the truck would have crashed into the hotel and exploded. Thank goodness he was there. Another one chimed in. You all sound like you're bewitched. Is Caspian really that strong? It sounds to me like he planned the whole thing, Jerry remarked. What do you mean by that, Mr. Andrews? An official asked. South Lake City is Caspian's territory. How could a truck get in if he had instructed his subordinates to set up defense measures? Don't you think there's something fishy about this? Jerry asked. Fishy? In what way? The official queried puzzledly. The hotel is surrounded by Caspian subordinates, but the enemy spies were able to mount an assassination attempt, and they even sent a suicide bomber. Can there really be such a coincidence? Jerry said. Mr. Andrews, are you saying Caspian had his people assassinate His Majesty? The official exclaimed. That seems to be the only possibility. There's no other way to explain this matter, Jerry declared. Everyone was thunderstruck. Jerry continued, His Majesty is staying in this hotel, but the security measures have proven to be entirely useless. Isn't that suspicious? Impossible. Lord Caspian is loyal to His Majesty. He wouldn't do such a thing. That's right. Lord Caspian has risked his life to save His Majesty many times now. Precisely. If Lord Caspian wanted His Majesty dead, he could have allowed that to happen when His Majesty was captured back at West Aridlands. He didn't need to rush over to save His Majesty. Everyone began sharing their opinions. You're all forgetting something. Caspian is now His Majesty's successor. If something happens to His Majesty, Caspian will be able to become the next king, Jerry declared. The officials exchanged looks of disbelief. It was indeed suspicious that Balthazar had been targeted by an assassination attempt. Logically speaking, the enemy shouldn't be aware of his whereabouts. But in reality, the enemy spies not only knew that he was at the hotel, but they even knew which room he was in. Based on that, Caspian was indeed a target for suspicion. There was no way the enemy could have gotten such detailed information about Balthazar's whereabouts. Thanks to Jerry's claims, everyone grew a little suspicious of Caspian. After all, he was indeed a powerful man with an army at his command. It was plausible that he had grown ambitious and wanted to become the king. Mr. Andrews is right, but His Majesty had already announced that Caspian would be his successor before he went to West Aridland. That happened before His Majesty was abducted by Quinton Hans, an official piped up. Since Caspian was already the successor then, he didn't need to save His Majesty. As long as His Majesty was killed, he could rightfully become the next king. At the time, Diatoran was besieged by the enemy on all fronts. Caspian probably thought it wasn't the right time for him to strike. For the sake of the nation's stability, he had to save His Majesty, Jerry said. So you think now's the right time for him to strike? A general asked. The enemy forces have been defeated, and Diatoran is slowly regaining its stability. Caspian probably thinks he can seize this opportunity to rise to the throne. You all saw what happened today. Caspian kept arguing with His Majesty. That makes him even more suspicious, Jerry declared. The crowd began to look fearful. They were in Caspian's territory. They were all in grave danger if Caspian did have his eyes on the throne. Meanwhile, Balthazar listened to the officials without saying a word. No one knew what he thought. Just then, Caspian came up to the top floor of the hotel, and he charged toward Balthazar with his diatanium dagger in hand. Chapter 643 A Mole Within Diatoran. Thus, when they saw Caspian rushing in with a weapon, they were terrified. Protect His Majesty! Jerry shouted at once. Everyone swiftly stood in front of Balthazar. Caspian's expression froze in confusion. He didn't understand what was going on. Caspian, what are you trying to do? Don't come any closer! Someone cried out fearfully. Are you trying to rebel, Caspian? Put down your weapon! Someone else shouted. Caspian was dumbfounded. He couldn't figure out what was happening. He only left for a little while. How did they suddenly get the idea that he wanted to rebel? When have I ever tried to rebel? Don't be ridiculous, Caspian snapped with a dark expression. Aren't you trying to assassinate His Majesty, Caspian? You've finally shown your true colors, Jerry declared. Stop with your nonsense, Jerry. When did I try to assassinate His Majesty? Caspian retorted. You're holding a weapon, aren't you? Isn't it because you want to attack His Majesty? Jerry roared. His Majesty has given me permission to keep my weapons with me when I see him, Caspian said as he started moving forward. Caspian wants to rebel against His Majesty. Stop it, everyone! Jerry shouted. The officials swiftly crowded around Balthazar. Balthazar couldn't take it anymore. Get out of the way, he hollered. Why are you people causing a scene? Everyone froze in shock. Your Majesty, Caspian wants to kill you, Jerry cried out. Caspian just dealt with the enemy spies. Isn't it normal for him to still be armed? Do you people have brains? Why are all of you making such a fuss? Balthazar fumed. Your Majesty, Caspian is clearly furious because his plan to assassinate you failed. He's coming at you himself, Jerry insisted. If Caspian wants to kill me, can you stop him? How dumb can you people get? If Caspian wanted to rebel, I would have died a long time ago, Balthazar snapped. Jerry and the other officials looked ashamed. None of them could hold Caspian back. It would be a piece of cake for Caspian to kill them. Caspian, tell me what happened, Balthazar said. Your Majesty, I just stopped a suicide bomb attack. I now suspect that we have a mole among us, so I came up here to protect you, Caspian replied. See? Caspian's here to protect me, so stop being so ridiculous, Balthazar said to the crowd. Upon hearing that, everyone exhaled in relief. Caspian wasn't rebelling after all. Caspian, why do you say we have a mole among us? Balthazar asked. Your Majesty, we have kept your whereabouts extremely confidential, but before you even arrived at the hotel, the enemy spies had already gotten in position for the assassination, and they knew where you'd be. It's clear that the moment you landed at the airport, someone leaked the information to the enemy, Caspian declared. Are you suggesting that the spies were prepared from the start? Balthazar exclaimed. That's right. I had my people check the surroundings, and they didn't find anyone suspicious. That implies that by the time we arrived at the hotel, the spies had already snuck into the building opposite the hotel, Caspian reported. He had already figured out what happened. Meanwhile, Balthazar had a look of realization. The other officials reacted in the same way. That explained why the enemy spies showed up despite all the soldiers posted around the hotel. On the contrary, I think you merely staged the whole thing, Caspian, Jerry declared. What are you trying to say, Jerry? Caspian questioned. Didn't you say we have a mole among us? I think you're the mole, Jerry shot back. Are you kidding me? Why would I be a spy? Caspian scoffed. You're the one who arranged His Majesty's accommodations. You're most likely to be the mole, Jerry stated. If the mole, why did I stop the truck from crashing into the hotel then? Caspian asked plainly. It was all part of your act. His Majesty is on the top floor. Even if the bomb exploded, he might not die. Jerry's insinuation was clear. My loyalty to His Majesty is as clear as day, so stop spewing such absurd nonsense, Caspian growled in fury. You might have been loyal to him in the past, but ever since he made you his successor, you've been eager to take his place, Jerry accused icily. Jerry once again brought up the matter of succession, and Balthazar couldn't stand it anymore. Jerry, stop being ridiculous. I have full confidence in Caspian. He won't betray me. I'm not trying to cause unnecessary alarm, Your Majesty. Everything I say is out of concern for you, Jerry said. Balthazar couldn't be bothered to entertain Jerry. He looked at Caspian and asked, Who do you think is the most likely to be the mole? It's only a guess of mine, Your Majesty. I can't tell who it is yet, Caspian replied. You must locate the mole as quickly as possible. Otherwise, there's no way to ensure my safety, and all the intel regarding Diatorin will be leaked too, Balthazar said. Yes, Your Majesty, I will definitely find the mole, Caspian declared with determination. I'll leave it to you, Caspian, Balthazar said. Your Majesty, I would like to ask you something, Caspian spoke up again. Go on. Your Majesty, did anyone look for you after you got to your room? Caspian asked. Why do you ask? Balthazar was confused. Since the enemy attempted to assassinate you, they had to know the layout of your room. If someone entered your room, he could very well be the mole. He could have provided the enemy with that very information, Caspian explained. Everyone understood what he meant, and they all began to eye Jerry in shock and terror. He seemed to be the only one who had gone to see Balthazar. Balthazar also recalled that Jerry had come to see him and bad-mouthed Caspian. Why do you look so pale, Jerry? Do you feel unwell? Balthazar asked when he noticed how strange Jerry looked. Noticing the intensity of Balthazar's gaze, Jerry timidly replied, Your Majesty, while I did come to see you, I'm not the mole. It was only then that Caspian realized Jerry had met with Balthazar in the latter's room. All eyes were on Jerry. I haven't said anything yet, so why are you so nervous? Balthazar asked with a frown. I'm afraid you'll get the wrong idea about me, so I thought I needed to explain myself at once, Jerry said. Caspian made a good point, and you're the only one who came to see me in my room. Go on. Explain yourself, Balthazar said while eyeing Jerry closely. I'm not the only one who knows which room you're in, Your Majesty. All of you guards do, too. They're also familiar with the layout of the room. Jerry swiftly defended himself. Chapter 644, An Anxious Defense. All of my guards were selected following extremely stringent background checks. There's no way one of them is the mole, Balthazar was certain. But I'm the Minister of Culture. Even though I'm not as powerful as Caspian, I still hold an important government position. There's no reason for me to be the mole, Jerry argued in his defense. Balthazar stared at Jerry without speaking, but his reaction only made Jerry feel even more flustered. He didn't know what Balthazar was thinking. I swear I'm not the mole, Your Majesty. If I were the mole, why would the spies use such heavy artillery and a bomb? I'd be dead too. Moles have always been people who value their lives above all else. Why would I risk my own life? Jerry continued. Balthazar nodded. Jerry had a point. Then, he said, I never said you were the mole, Jerry. You're the one who kept trying to explain yourself. I'm just afraid you'd be swayed by Caspian, your majesty. He's making it sound like anyone who came to see you is undoubtedly the mole." "That's absurd," Jerry said while exhaling in relief. "If you're innocent, what's there to fear?" Balthazar remarked. Though he couldn't know for sure whether Jerry was the mole, he had his guard up against the latter from now on. "It's only normal for me to feel scared, your majesty. Even though I know I'm innocent, I'm still afraid. I so happen to be the one who came to your room, and Lord Caspian has said that the one who did is the mole. He's clearly targeting me," Jerry said cautiously. "I think Caspian made a very good point that's worthy of consideration," Balthazar commented. Nervous, Jerry quickly said, "I don't think he's right, your majesty." "Why not?" Balthazar asked. "The enemy spies only had to know the location of your room, your majesty. They didn't need to understand its layout. The mortar they used was enough to cause serious damage no matter what the layout was," Jerry stated. "Therefore, Lord Caspian's theory is flawed. Many people knew your room, your majesty. I'm not the only one." "That's enough. I'll set this aside for now," Balthazar said with a wave of his hand. There was no way of determining who the mole was yet. "Caspian, I'm putting you in charge of uncovering the mole," Balthazar instructed. "Yes, your majesty." Caspian's prime suspect was Jerry. It was strange that Jerry kept trying to target him. "Your majesty, since the enemy knows you're here, you have to move out right away," Jerry said. "Caspian, where do you think is the safest place for me?" Balthazar asked. "I think it's best for you to stay in the hotel," Caspian replied. "Why's that?" Balthazar was puzzled. "I've arranged for more soldiers to secure the place. We have our people on every corner within a 1-mile radius of the hotel. There won't be any more unexpected situations," Caspian firmly declared. "All right, I'll stay here then," Balthazar said with a nod. "You can't, your majesty," Jerry swiftly cautioned. "Why not?" Balthazar frowned. He was getting fed up with Jerry's protests. Everyone else had nothing to say, but Jerry seemed to find fault with almost everything. "Our location has been exposed, so even if there are a lot of soldiers around, this place is still extremely dangerous. What if even more enemy spies come in?" Jerry said anxiously. "You're worrying for nothing. The enemy won't be able to sneak in," Caspian declared confidently. "What if they attack by air or launch a missile strike on the hotel?" Jerry questioned. "Do you think our air force is merely there for show? If the enemy's missiles can enter our airspace so easily, what's the point of having a missile defense system?" "Lord Caspian, His Majesty is the head of our nation. We can't afford any mistakes," Jerry retorted. "If you're worried, your majesty, you can stay at my place for a few days," Caspian suggested. Alas, before Balthazar could even speak, Jerry exclaimed, "You mustn't stay in Lord Caspian's house, your majesty." "What now?" Balthazar snapped in annoyance. "You're the ruler of our nation. What if Lord Caspian tries to assassinate you once you move into his place? You'll be all alone without anyone to help you," Jerry said anxiously. Infuriated, Caspian growled, "Jerry, stop making false accusations. I've put up with you long enough. I am nothing but loyal to His Majesty. I'll never do anything to hurt him. Lord Caspian, enemy spies have attempted to assassinate His Majesty, and we have a mole among us. I'm just thinking on behalf of His Majesty's safety," Jerry retorted. "Quiet," Balthazar fumed. "Caspian, thank you for the offer. I'll remain in the hotel." "I have faith in your ability to keep me safe," he said. Now that Balthazar was genuinely angry, Jerry clammed up. "Thank you for believing in me, your majesty. I'll immediately arrange for more soldiers to stand guard in the area," Caspian said. He swiftly had Sylvia come over with 10,000 armored soldiers. Without wasting any time, Sylvia swiftly rushed over with the soldiers in tow. The entire Jade Dragon Grand Hotel was surrounded by Diaturanian soldiers. Caspian intended to remain in the hotel as well, but since there were more than enough soldiers around, Balthazar didn't think Caspian needed to stay. Thus, after making all the arrangements, Caspian went back to Riverside Villa. Lena had already instructed her subordinates to search the entirety of Diatoran to locate Caspian's birth mother, Sherry, as well as Willow's birth mother, Irene. The kings of Vedesia and Estronia learned that the assassination attempt had failed. They were irate that the carefully crafted plan had ended in failure. Furthermore, the kings of Estronia, Vedesia, Finland, and Estria all found out that Balthazar had conducted a meeting and was preparing to attack all 4 countries. Terrified, they called a meeting of their own to discuss a way to deal with Diatoran. Some suggested making peace with Diatoran by ceding some territory and providing monetary compensation. Some thought they should continue attacking Diatoran, and some thought it was best to observe the situation for a while before coming to a decision. If Diatoran did indeed dispatch their troops, they could seize the chance to attack Diatoran's capital. None of the heads of state were willing to concede defeat. They didn't want to be saddled with the hefty compensation. The Archers and the Hudsons were all imprisoned, along with Henry. Having betrayed their nation, they were now terrified of their fate.
Are we really going to die?
Richard asked fearfully. Caspian said we are, Henry replied. Well, can we do something? Are we just going to accept our fate just like that? Richard asked. Chapter 645, The Steward's Decision. You troublemakers have ruined us all, Grant cried out agitatedly. That's right. Why did you three even think about betraying Diatoran? I regret ever listening to you, Lawrence fumed. For the last 2 days in captivity, Richard and Nicholas suffered relentless rebukes from their families, and both were too ashamed to defend themselves. Now that I think about it, we Stuarts are a lot wiser, Henry remarked. He had tried to convince his family to betray their country, too, but none of them agreed to do so. Stop trying to rub it in our faces, Henry. You're stuck in here with the rest of us, too, Lawrence snapped. Exactly. You're going to die, just like the rest of us, so you've got nothing to celebrate, Grant added with a snort. Yeah, I've also been captured, but the rest of the Stuarts are all fine, Henry retorted. I tried to convince them to join me, but none of them wanted to. Meanwhile, look at you guys. You let Nicholas and Richard persuade you into committing an act of treason, but now you're trying to blame them for your situation. What a joke. You wouldn't be here right now if you'd been as wise as my family. You made the choice yourselves. You got what's coming for you. Lawrence and Grant trembled with rage. You may be glib, but you're a goner anyway, so what's there for you to brag about? Grant growled. At least I'm the only one who's dying. That's way better than you guys. Both your families are all going down. Ha ha ha, Henry gloated. I can't believe you can even laugh right now. Isn't Caspian, your cousin's husband, the Diatoranian god of war? He didn't even choose to spare you. How saddening, Lawrence said. Not only is Caspian not going to save Henry, but he's even dead set on executing Henry. How saddening indeed. Grant joined in on the mockery after seeing the smug look on Henry's face. Say whatever you want. I don't care. When the enemy beat up Alicia and me, well, now both your families are going to be executed. I'm so happy for you guys, Henry remarked. Henry, even if you're not scared to die, I am. Hurry up and beg Caspian for mercy. Ask him to let us off the hook just this once, Richard called out. Do you think I'd be stuck in here if that's possible? We're all traitors who betrayed our nation. There's no way we're getting out of this alive, Henry replied. If I die, Alicia's going to be widowed at such a young age. Are you sure you want to let that happen? Richard asked. Didn't you cut off all ties with Alicia already? In any case, Alicia's an attractive young woman. She can just remarry if you die. After all, you're an impotent loser anyway, Henry commented. Richard ground his teeth in anger. He was consumed by regret. He only divorced Alicia because he had been tricked by Robert. Alas, it was too late to change anything now. Over at Riverside Villa, Willow received yet another call from Melinda. She didn't want to take the call as she knew Melinda was calling about Henry again. Still, after thinking it over, she answered her phone anyway. Whoa, Willow asked exasperatedly. Willow, have you heard from Caspian yet? Melinda immediately asked. All she cared about was Henry. I've spoken to him about Henry, Willow replied. What did Caspian say? Will he release Henry? Melinda checked fearfully. Caspian said. Willow faltered. She didn't know how to convey the message. Caspian had already decided to execute Henry. Naturally, Willow's hesitance only made Melinda even more nervous. What did Caspian say? Melinda asked anxiously. Caspian said there's irrefutable evidence that Henry betrayed the country, so he can't be released, Willow replied. There was no point trying to hide this. The Stuarts were going to find out sooner or later. Melinda stiffened before asking, how will Henry be punished? The crime of betraying the country is a serious one. He'll be executed, Willow said. Melinda immediately felt woozy. Willow, hurry up and plead on Henry's behalf. You must save him. You're the only one who can. I'm sure Caspian will listen to you, Melinda urged. I tried my best, but Caspian said Henry can't be freed, Willow replied, overwhelmed with despair. Melinda felt numb. She didn't know what to do. Hello? Is there anything else? I'm ending the call now. Willow didn't get an answer. After waiting for another 10 seconds, she dropped the call. Though she felt bad, there was nothing she could do about the situation. Meanwhile, the Stuarts got a bad feeling when they saw how ashen-faced Melinda was. How did it go? What did Willow say? Donald asked. Yeah, how is Caspian going to punish Henry? Marilyn added. After snapping out of her daze, Melinda reported defeatedly, "Willow said Caspian wants to execute Henry." Everyone froze in shock. They still found it hard to accept, despite preparing for such a possibility. "Didn't Willow plead for mercy on his behalf?" Donald asked. "She said Caspian has made up his mind, and he won't budge when it comes to something as serious as this. What should we do?" "We can't just let them kill Henry," Donald exclaimed. Henry was his only son, so he was determined to save him. "Carl, you and Caspian have always had a good relationship. Why don't you plead with Caspian? Maybe he'll listen to you," Melinda suggested. "It's useless. Even Willow couldn't persuade him, so why would he listen to me?" "Mom! Henry is the only male steward of his generation. Hurry up and think of a way to save him. You can't just stand by and let him be executed," Donald said to Marilyn. After giving it some thought, Marilyn said, "Why don't we head over to Riverside Villa and plead with Caspian? Maybe we can convince him." "Well, stop standing around then. Let's head over there right now," Donald urged. "Let's go." "We'll all go over to Riverside Villa together," Marilyn instructed. They needed to take action at once, or else Henry might die. Thus, the stewards swiftly drove over to Riverside Villa. Soon after Caspian returned to Riverside Villa, the stewards were already in the vicinity. However, they were less than 300 feet away from the villa when the armored battalion stopped them. "Who are you?" "This is Lord Caspian's residence. No one's allowed to approach without permission," the armored soldiers hollered while pointing their weapons. Chapter 646 The Stewards' Plea. The stewards were terrified when they saw weapons being pointed at them. They got out of their cars and came over. Even Marilyn was shaking. "What do you think you're doing?" "We're the stewards. I'm Willow's grandma," Marilyn cried out fearfully. "Put your guns down. If you hurt us by accident, Lord Caspian's wife will come after you," Melinda added. However, the armored soldiers didn't move. For all they knew, these people could be lying to them. "I'm Carl Stewart, Lord Caspian's father-in-law. Please inform him that we're here," Carl said, stepping forward. The soldiers exchanged look. They knew Caspian was married to the steward's daughter. "Wait here while I report this to the house," one of the soldiers instructed. Since these people could be Willow's family, they decided to check with Caspian first. One of the soldiers went into the house and told Caspian, "There's a group of people outside who claim to be the stewards. Do you wish to see them, sir?" "Oh? Is that so? Let them in," Caspian said. He could figure out why they were here. Moments later, the stewards began approaching the house. The compound was surrounded by soldiers, making them feel nervous. Caspian got up and walked out of the house. Even though he had no regard for the stewards, he was still on good terms with Carl, and out of politeness, he went out to greet him. "Grandma, why did you guys come here?" Willow asked in curiosity. She had followed Caspian out of the house. "We came to plead on Henry's behalf. We hope Caspian can release him." Marilyn got straight to the point. Both Caspian and Willow had seen that come, of course. "Let's go in," Caspian said. Despite his ill feelings for them, he was still decent enough to show basic courtesy. "Yep, sure." Marilyn led the stewards into the house. Everyone settled down in the living room, and Willow prepared coffee for them. Alas, the stewards were too agitated to enjoy a relaxing cup of coffee. "We won't beat around the bush, Caspian. We hope you can spare Henry's life," Donald said. "That's right, Caspian. Even though we treated you badly, you and Willow are still related to the Stewart family. Can't you have mercy on Henry?" Melinda asked. "I'll be honest with you. If Henry had committed any other crime, I could have considered sparing his life. However, after what he did, it's impossible," Caspian coolly replied. The stewards were disheartened by Caspian's merciless response. What did Henry even do? "Why must he be executed?" Marilyn asked. Henry maintained close contact with Videsian spies. He, Richard, and Nicholas worked together to create unrest among the people. They even goaded the citizens into attacking Riverside Villa. "Do you think I can absolve him of punishment for his crimes?" Caspian asked. The stewards all looked ashamed. "Henry's just young and immature. That's why he did those things. Just give him another chance. He'll turn over a new leaf," Marilyn persuaded. Henry was too young to die. The family couldn't accept such an outcome. He chose to betray Diatoran. That's a matter of principle. "The citizens of Diatoran will be enraged if they find out I released a traitor," Caspian replied. "Caspian, I know we stewards have done you wrong. I'm sure you think poorly of us. Nevertheless, I hope that on account of us being Willow's family, you'll spare Henry just this once. We'll make sure he becomes an upright citizen," Marilyn beseeched. "Henry's the only male steward of his generation. If he die, the family line will die out with him. Please, Caspian." Have mercy on Henry just this once, Melinda pleaded. Nothing you say will change my mind. As the Diatoranian god of war, I won't show mercy when the best interests of Diatoran are at stake. Henry's crimes are punishable by death. I'm merely abiding by the laws of this nation. Willow and I will have several children. We'll give one of them the last name Stewart so that the family line will continue, Caspian said. Caspian was resolute. He was executing Henry no matter what. Since Henry was a traitor who betrayed Diatoran, there was no way he could be freed. Such a verdict would only stir outrage among the people. Meanwhile, Marilyn felt both shaken and pleased by Caspian's response. It sounded like Caspian was willing to mend his ties with the Stewart family. If the Stewarts could establish a good relationship with Caspian, they would certainly soar to great heights in South Lake City. Still, the thought of losing Henry made Marilyn feel upset. She had mixed feelings about this situation. She didn't know if she should feel happy or sad. At last, Marilyn said, I'd rather cut off ties between you and the Stewart family than let Henry die. Naturally, she still wanted to save her grandson Henry. So be it then. If you insist on pleading for mercy on Henry's behalf, please leave. There's no way I'd release him, Caspian declared. Marilyn didn't know what to say. She could see how determined Caspian was. Caspian, can't you spare Henry just this once? You can punish him however you want, but please spare his life, Carl piped up. At the end of the day, he was still a Stewart, so he felt he needed to help Henry as well. Dad, please don't put me in a tough spot. I'm willing to compromise on other matters, but this decision is final, Caspian coolly responded. You can exile Henry to the border and give him a chance to reform. I'm sure he'll change his ways, Carl suggested. A leopard can't change its spots. If he can choose to betray his nation once, he'll do it again if the situation arises. He can no longer be trusted. Who knows what else he'll do next time, Caspian staunchly declared. After hearing that, Carl knew he couldn't convince Caspian. Donald and Melinda were also overwhelmed with despair. They could tell that Henry was doomed. They immediately fell to their knees in front of Caspian, who felt a little helpless and exasperated. He didn't think they would kneel at his feet. Despite not having a good relationship with the Stewarts, Caspian didn't feel good about letting them kneel before him. Uncle Donald, Aunt Melinda, do get up. What you're doing will only put Caspian in a difficult position, Willow urged. Don't bother trying to talk us out of it, Willow. We're going to kneel here until Caspian agrees to let Henry go, Donald declared. That's right. Caspian, instead of executing Henry, you could always just keep him imprisoned for life. We just want you to spare his life, Melinda said. Why don't you stand up first? Caspian said helplessly. We won't. We're going to kneel until you agree not to execute Henry, Melinda cried out tearfully. Chapter 647 Henry has to die. That's right. Caspian, since we're Willow's family, please have mercy on Henry. It was his first offense. He only did it because I didn't raise him right. Why don't you take my life in exchange for his? I've lived long enough, Donald declared. Caspian was taken aback by Donald's offer. Donald and Melinda truly loved Henry, but their indulgence had led to this situation. Do you think this would have happened if you had realized the problem with your parenting sooner? Caspian asked. We acknowledge that we've made a terrible mistake. We'll definitely teach Henry to become a better person, Melinda vowed. The sight of Donald and Melinda kneeling before him made Caspian feel cornered. Just then, Marilyn said, Can't you see how sincere they are? Caspian, are you still refusing to have mercy on Henry? In that case, I'll kneel as well. It doesn't matter who kneels before me today. Henry will die no matter what, Caspian said. How can you be so heartless? Marilyn cried out in anger. Our soldiers risked their lives to protect Diatoran. Many willingly sacrificed their lives in the process. And what did Henry do? He chose to collude with the enemy. How many people have suffered due to his actions? He who betrays the nation will never be forgiven, Caspian stated adamantly. The Stewarts lowered their head, feeling shame and remorse. Caspian's right. It's not like he wants to do this, but what can he do? Henry chose to ally himself with the enemy. How can anyone trust Caspian as the Diatoranian god of war if he shows Henry leniency? Willow said. Willow, why are you helping Caspian by exaggerating things? Are you trying to give me a heart attack? Melinda screeched. All I did was tell the truth. Henry didn't care about my life either, so why should I help him? Caspian's my husband. Isn't it only right for me to side with him? Willow retorted. Even though you're Lady Willow now, that doesn't mean you should look down on us. You've changed, Willow. Don't you know you should never burn your bridges? If you're going to be like this, fine, but don't you ever come to me for help, Melinda shrieked. Melinda's outburst only served to get on Caspian's nerves. He snapped, "That's enough. You should leave. Henry's fate can't be changed. This is the law. Even if I want to spare him, the decision's out of my hands." The stewards glanced at each other. They didn't know what to do now. Should they stay or leave? "Let's go." "We don't need to stick around and demean ourselves in front of him," Marilyn said angrily. Caspian refused to relent despite the fact that they had humbled themselves to plead with him. "What about Henry, Mom? Are we just going to stand by and do nothing?" Donald asked. "We have said all there is to say to Caspian, but he refuses to budge, so what's the point of staying here?" Marilyn snapped before storming off. The stewards quickly joined her. "Dad, wait!" Willow called out to Carl. "What is it, Willow?" Carl asked. "Dad, you know the position Caspian holds. There are things that he can't change, principles he has to follow. I hope everyone can understand that," Willow said. She didn't want the stewards to think Caspian was a heartless man. "I know. Henry got himself into this," Carl said. "Yeah, we have our hands tied, too," Willow added. "I understand. Caspian made the right choice for the sake of Diatoran. He's an influential figure. Everyone has eyes on him. It wouldn't be good if he got into trouble because of Henry," Carl said. Touched, Willow expressed, "You're the best, Dad. Why don't you stay with us for a few days?" "It's all right. I'll come over when this matter is over," Carl said. "Okay. You guys take good care of yourselves," Willow said. "Don't worry about us. I'm sure you'll be a great wife to Caspian," Carl said. Willow stood outside and watched the stewards leave before returning to Caspian's side. "Willow, are you mad at me for not going easy on Henry?" Caspian asked. "Certainly not. Henry betrayed our country. He deserves to die. You did the right thing, so why would I be mad at you?" Willow assured. As the stewards headed home, Donald asked, "Mom, why are we heading back home?" "What about Henry?" "Caspian's not going to be swayed by us, so what's the point of staying there?" Marilyn said. "Is there nothing we can do? Are we just going to stand by and let them execute Henry?" Donald asked. "Let's put our heads together and think about what we can do. Maybe we'll find a way," Marilyn suggested. "Caspian's the Diateranian god of war. He's powerful enough to help us, but he refuses to do so. Who else can we get to save Henry?" Donald asked. "Where there's a will, there's a way. We still have a few days to find a solution," Marilyn said. As Tom and Miranda fled the conflict, they somehow ended up in the city of Turin. They had evacuated with the other citizens of South Lake City, but they got separated from the group and ended up here. However, their wallets and IDs were stolen upon their arrival, and they even got lost. They were wandering along the outskirts of the city when they met a kind soul who provided them with shelter. The kind soul was a middle-aged woman who introduced herself as Sherry Lynch, and she seemed to be a resident of Turin. After seeing how pitiful Tom and Miranda were, Sherry invited them to stay with her for the time being. Sherry had a daughter named Cecilia Lynch. Cecilia was still in high school. She had recently turned 18 years old and was a gorgeous young woman. Sherry's house was approximately 15 miles away from Turin's city center. Every day, she would gather wild products from the neighboring forest area and sell them in the city to earn a living. As the sun started to set, the rain started to fall heavily. Sherry wasn't back yet. "Tom, the sky was clear when Madam Lynch and Cecilia left. They didn't bring an umbrella with them. Why don't we head out to find them?" Miranda suggested. "All right, I'll go. You stay here," Tom said. He didn't want Miranda to get wet in the rain, lest she became ill. "I want to go, too. Madam Lynch has been very kind to us. I want to help her when I can," Miranda objected. "It'll be slower if we both head out together. I can bring an umbrella to them myself. The rain won't be letting up anytime soon," Tom said. "I don't feel good about staying here by myself. Let's go together," Miranda insisted. Truth be told, she was afraid of remaining in the house alone. Chapter 648, Twisting Things Around. "Okay then, let's go," Tom said with a nod. Armed with raincoats and umbrellas, Tom and Miranda left the house. The rain was pouring. Lightning flashed in the distance as the two headed toward Turin's city center. Sherry and Cecilia were riding on an old bicycle with a sidecar attached. They were both drenched from the rain. As the sky darkened, it became harder for them to see the road ahead. Gritting her teeth, Sherry did her best to ride the bicycle home. "Mom, why don't we stop and take shelter somewhere? We can wait out the rain before we head home," Cecilia suggested. "There's no shelter anywhere near it, Cece. Let's just get home as soon as we can," Sherry said. "All right, Mom, you should rest. I'll take us home," Cecilia urged. "It's fine, just sit back there." "I'm not tired," Sherry firmly declined. She didn't want to let Cecilia ride in her place as she knew how hard it was to ride a bicycle. Under such weather conditions, all of a sudden, there was a flash of light in the distance, and a Maybach came charging toward them. When the women saw the Maybach, it was only a few feet away from them. Sherry swiftly tried to veer the bicycle to the right, but the Maybach came rushing at them anyway. Arrrrrrr! Sherry and Cecilia screamed in panic. The Maybach was going too fast. They couldn't avoid it. There was a loud crash as the Maybach slammed into the bicycle. Sherry and Cecilia were sent flying off the bicycle. They shrieked as they hit the ground. Even though the driver of the Maybach tried to slam the brakes, the road was too slippery and the car was going too fast. It couldn't be stopped in time. When the Maybach finally stopped by the side of the road, a drunk young man came out, followed by two equally drunk men. All three of them studied the damage. The front of the car was dented and one of the lights had shattered. The first man was infuriated, and his two friends swiftly started making comments. "Look at the damage on your new car, Blake. It pains me to see it." "That's right, Blake. Isn't it frustrating that a shabby bicycle did so much damage to your fancy Maybach? Fucking hell. I won't let this slide." The owner of the Maybach marched up to Sherry and Cecilia. He was Blake Jessup, the son of a real estate tycoon in Turin. When Sherry saw Cecilia lying motionless on the ground, she bore through the pain she felt and crawled over. "Cece, are you okay?" Sherry exclaimed. "I'm fine, Mom. Don't worry." "Are you hurt?" Cecilia asked as she gasped in pain. "I'm all right. I'm just a little startled," Sherry assured as she helped Cecilia up. As soon as they got up, they saw Blake and his lackeys coming over. "Are you fucking blind? Why did you bang into my car?" Blake roared as he kicked Sherry in the abdomen. Sherry yelped as she fell to the ground. "Mom!" Cecilia shouted. "I think I sprained my waist." Sherry groaned in pain. "How can you kick her? You didn't even bother to find out what happened," Cecilia fumed. "So what if I did? You ruined my new car. Why can't I teach you two a lesson, huh?" Blake growled. He was furious that his new car had been damaged so severely when he had only driven it for a few days. "We stayed in our lane on the right. You're the one who drove on the wrong side and crashed into us. Why are you twisting things around and accusing us of crashing into you?" Cecilia argued angrily. "How dare you try to refute me? It's your fault for suddenly showing up on the road. Why would I bang into you if you people weren't here?" Blake retorted. Despite the rainstorm, Cecilia caught the stench of alcohol from the three men. "You were driving under the influence, and you even drove above the speed limit. This isn't a motorway. You've broken the law," Cecilia snapped. "So what if I was drinking, huh? So what if it's not a motorway? I can't stand beggars like you who live in this area. You're ruining Turin's image," Blake said scornfully. "Hey bitch, do you know how much his Maybach is worth?" One of Blake's friends piped up. "Yeah, you beggars probably can't even afford one of the tires," the other chimed in. "You're the one who crashed into us. I'm not going to argue with you. I'll let the authorities handle this," Cecilia said as she took her phone out to make the call. Blake swiftly snatched her phone away and threw it onto the ground. "You! How dare you!" Cecilia screamed in fury. "So what if you call the authorities? I've got people in high places," Blake smirked. His indifference scared Cecilia a little. She was still a high schooler, unexposed to the evils of society. There was no way she and Sherry could pay for the Maybach. "You ruined my favorite car. Pay up," Blake demanded. "How much?" "Do you want us to pay?" Sherry asked fearfully. $500,000, Blake declared. "What did you say? $500,000? Sherry was dumbstruck. She couldn't even afford to pay $50,000, let alone $500,000. "That's right. My car's worth millions. It'll cost hundreds of thousands just to fix it up a little," Blake said. "I don't have that kind of money," Sherry muttered. "You think I don't know that? You're broke. I'm going to teach you a lesson first," Blake fumed. Upon hearing that, Blake's friends immediately marched up to Sherry and started hitting her. Cecilia rushed forward to stop them. "Stop! Don't hit her! Stop it!" One of the men swiftly slapped Cecilia, and she stumbled to the ground. Sherry's heart broke at the sight of Cecilia getting slapped. Alas, Blake's friends continued to kick Sherry, and she couldn't move at all. "Mom!" Cecilia screamed. Her heart broke when she saw the men attacking Sherry. She wanted to defend Sherry, but she couldn't do anything. How could the two of them win a fight against three grown men? Cecilia had no choice but to beg. "Please stop hitting her. You're going to kill her. Please stop." Chapter 649 Make Me Feel Good. Alas, the two men remained unmoved, no matter how hard Cecilia shouted. Cecilia could only approach Blake. Falling to her knee, she begged, "Sir, please have mercy on my mom. She's too old. She'll die if your friends keep kicking her." Blake looked down at Cecilia. She had a youthful beauty, but the rain made her clothes cling to her figure, accentuating her feminine curves. She was unlike the other women he had been with before. Taking in the state she was in as she kneeled before him, Blake had a devilish thought. "I'll tell them to stop on one condition," he said. "I'll do whatever I can, so please let her go," Cecilia hurriedly promised without thinking too much about it. Sherry had told Cecilia that they weren't biologically related. Cecilia's birth parents had abandoned her as a baby, and by coincidence, Sherry found Cecilia. Even though Sherry earned a meager living, she doted on Cecilia and gave her everything she could. Cecilia grew up to be a mature and well-mannered young woman. She was also a brilliant student, and when she saw Sherry being assaulted, the only thing she could think of was to save her mother. "All right, you can pleasure me, then," Blake said with a leer. "Pleasure you? How?" Cecilia asked. She was still an innocent schoolgirl who didn't understand what Blake meant. "Oh? You're unfamiliar with the pleasures of physical intimacy, huh? That makes things far more exciting. Ha ha ha. You're going to pleasure my buddy here, of course," Blake declared as he pointed at his crotch. Cecilia jumped in fright. Though she was innocent, it didn't mean she was clueless. Naturally, she figured out what Blake meant. Never would she have expected him to be such a monster. "No way," Cecilia stammered. "If you refuse, I'll tell them to kill your mother, but if you do as I say, I'll spare you and your mother's lives," Blake said slyly. They were standing in the rain in the middle of nowhere. Blake felt thrilled at the thought of getting some action out in the open like this. "I won't do it. You can ask for something else instead," Cecilia said uncomfortably. "That's all I want. As long as you make me feel good, I won't ask you for 500 grand. That means you're getting 500 grand just for letting me have some fun. Where else are you going to get such a good deal?" Blake sneered. "You're a pervert. I'll never do such a thing," Cecilia declared, clenching her jaw. "Are you willing to watch as your mother gets beaten to death then? As long as you make me feel good, I'll consider this matter settled," Blake said. Even though Cecilia wanted to save Sherry, she couldn't comply with Blake's outrageous demand. However, as she heard Sherry scream, she felt flustered. "Leave, Cece. Don't worry about me," Sherry shouted after hearing what Blake wanted. She couldn't let Cecilia go through such a traumatizing ordeal. Sherry would rather die than let Cecilia be assaulted. Cecilia heard Sherry's cries, but she could never bring herself to leave alone. "I'm begging you. Please just let us go. Ask me for something else." "I'll do anything as long as it's not too unreasonable," Cecilia pleaded with Blake. "You heard me. All I want is for you to pleasure me. How dare you resist? Do you know how many women are dying to get the chance to make me feel good?" Blake scoffed. "No, never." Cecilia was resolute. "Seer, leave, now," Sherry shouted as Blake's buddies continued to beat her up. Blake heard the shouts, and he was worried Cecilia would run away and he wouldn't get to have his fun. Thus, he grabbed Cecilia's head and started shoving it toward his crotch. "What are you doing? Let go!" Cecilia shrieked as she tried to get away from him, but he was too strong. Her efforts were in vain. When Sherry saw this, she let out a blood-curdling scream. Somehow, she found the strength to get away from the two young men, swiftly charging at Blake. Blake was dumbfounded. He didn't expect Sherry to get a sudden burst of strength. Sherry slammed into Blake, and he fell backward. She stumbled down as well. Cecilia was shocked, and so were Blake's friends when they saw Blake falling. "Blake! Are you alright, Blake?" The two men quickly helped Blake back onto his feet. "Mom! Are you okay?" Cecilia also tried to help Sherry up. "Cece, leave at once. Forget about me," Sherry urged. She knew things would only get worse if Cecilia stuck around, so she wanted the latter to get out of there. "I won't leave without you, Mom," Cecilia declared. "I sprained my leg. Hurry up and leave." "You can call the authorities," Sherry said. "I can't go, Mom. They'll start hitting you again. We'll leave together." Cecilia was adamant. Sherry relented and nodded. They couldn't afford to waste any more time arguing over this. "Stop them!" Blake roared. His friends immediately went after the two women. Sherry had sprained her ankle, so she couldn't move quickly. "Cece, run!" "Don't worry about me. You have to go, or they'll catch up to you." Sherry immediately turned around and charged at the men. How could a middle-aged woman defeat three men? In an instant, Blake kicked her to the ground. "How dare you try to run? Give her a good beating. Make sure she can't escape again," Blake hollered. The two other men swiftly started kicking Sherry again. After seeing this, Cecilia couldn't bring herself to leave. She ran back while shouting, "Stop! Stop hitting her!" When Blake saw her turning back, he stood still and stopped going after her. "I told you. If you make me feel good, I'll let you and your mother live, but you refused me. You're out of chances now, bitch, Blake snarled. What on earth do you want? What would it take for you to let us go? Cecilia cried out helplessly. Do it with me in the car, and I'll let you two go, Blake said with a sleazy smirk. Chapter 650, Just in Time. Cecilia's expression stiffened. Even though she was a virgin, she knew exactly what Blake was insinuating. The moment she entered that car, she would be at his mercy. Never. Cecilia shook her head. Since you refuse, I'll let you watch as your mother gets beaten to death, Blake snapped. The last of his patience was gone. Even though Cecilia refused to give in to his demand, he was going to drag her into the car and rape her anyway. That only made him feel even more exhilarated. You'll be arrested by the authorities, Cecilia threatened. The authorities? They won't have the balls to come after me, Blake declared haughtily. The whole time, the other two men continued to thrash Sherry within an inch of her life. Cecilia wanted to stop them, but she was powerless. She had no choice but to grab Blake's leg and plead, Please, I'm begging you, please stop, she'll die. Furious, Blake kicked her aside. When Tom and Miranda approached the area, they heard shouts in the distance. Tom, I think something's happening over there. Look, I think someone's getting beaten up, Miranda said while pointing ahead. She couldn't see who the victim was. It looks like Madam Lynch and Cecilia, Tom exclaimed. As a martial arts expert, he had keener senses. Thus, he spotted Sherry and Cecilia, who were both injured. Infuriated, Tom rushed over to them. Robbed of all their money, Tom and Miranda had been staying with Sherry ever since they arrived in Turin. She had saved them. Now that she was in danger, Tom would not stand by and do nothing. Hold it right there, Tom roared as he charged at the men. Make and his buddies were startled by the sudden shout. At the very next second, Tom slammed his fist into Blake's face. Blake howled as he flew backward, while the other two watched on in disbelief. Tom, what are you doing here? Cecilia exclaimed when she saw him. It was raining, so we wanted to bring you guys an umbrella. What happened? Tom asked. Those three men are all drunk, and they hit us with their car, but they tried to twist things around. They demanded $500,000 from us, but we don't have that kind of money. So they started hitting us. Cecilia sobbed as she told him the gist of the situation. Those bastards! How dare they beat you guys up when they're the ones who crashed into you? Tom was furious, terrified of Tom. Blake's friends didn't dare to attack him. They ran over to Blake instead. Are you okay, Blake? They checked anxiously. Fucking hell. Help me up. I'm going to kill that fucker, Blake bellowed. His face was all banged up. Upon seeing that he could still curse at the top of his lungs, his friends felt less worried. Meanwhile, Tom saw the heavily injured Sherry and quickly helped her up. Are you all right, Madam Lynch? He asked. Alas, Sherry seemed to have fainted from the pain, and her pitiful state fueled Tom's anger even further. Mom, are you okay? Cecilia cried out as she kneeled beside Sherry. Miranda finally caught up to Tom, and when she saw the state Sherry was in, she was alarmed. What happened? Those drunk men hit us with their car and demanded that we pay them for it. That guy over there even wanted me to have sex with him. I refused, so they started hitting us. Cecilia repeated the story. Outraged, Miranda declared, Don't worry. Now that Tom's here, he'll deal with those vermin. Tom was infuriated by the new information Cecilia shared this time around. Determined to teach those bastards a lesson, Tom stormed over to Blake. The sight of him made Blake and his buddies tremble in fear. They instinctively stepped back. Do you have a fucking death wish? How dare you punch me? Blake growled. Tom didn't respond as he continued to approach. Blake stiffened up, feeling even more afraid now. What are you trying to do? Blake croaked out. You crashed into them and tried to blame them for the accident instead, and you even beat up Madam Lynch. I'm going to teach you a lesson if it's the last thing I do, Tom growled. What the fuck? Get him! Fuck him up! Blake ordered his two buddies. However, the two men exchanged glances, and neither one moved. Why aren't you moving? What's there to be afraid of? There are two of you, Blake roared. Still tipsy, the men were easily convinced, so they nodded and charged at Tom, whose expression hardened. Cecilia immediately grew worried. Could Tom take two guys on at once? However, Miranda didn't seem worried at all. Tom raised both his fists. The moment the two men came up to him, they immediately stumbled backward. He had punched them both in the face. The men howled in agony as they crumpled to the ground. Cecilia was flabbergasted. Never would she have thought that Tom was such a good fighter. Meanwhile, Blake was terrified when he saw that both his buddies had been knocked unconscious. He started wondering who Tom was. Why was he such an expert at fighting? Instantly, he sobered up. More than 10 seconds passed before the two men slowly regained consciousness, but they felt dizzy and couldn't stand up. But even if they could stand, they would choose to stay on the ground anyway. Tom was too good of a fighter. They would rather pretend to be too injured to get up than to take a few more of his punches. Tom glared at Blake and started walking toward the ladder. Blake swiftly hurried toward his car to get away from Tom. But alas, Tom went after him. Just as Blake grabbed the handle to open the car door, Tom kicked him in the back. Blake howled in pain as his head bashed against the car door. The door caved in from the impact. Cecilia was stunned by what she saw. Even though Blake writhed on the ground in pain, Tom wasn't satisfied. When Blake tried to get up, Tom stomped on his chest and forced him back down. "What are you trying to do?" Blake asked fearfully.